It's a bright sunny afternoon in the city of Port Harcourt. I am David Everest, reporting for FST. Recently, we've seen a disturbing trend of domestic violence in our society rapidly grow, and the perpetrators of this act is mostly loved ones and family. Dismally, women and children are the ones that suffer from this the most. So we are in the city of Port Harcourt today trying to get reactions from people about how this can be averted, how this can be stopped. Is it a function of how we were brought up? Is it an orientation issue? How can we stop this? So follow me on this trip as we go about getting reactions from people.
Violence is a menace in the society, and it is in this parts of the country. It is even higher than I think other parts. Why? Because the causes, most times, drugs. That's what I think. When somebody is into hard drugs, sometimes he can't control his temper, and before you see, it will be violent on either his spouse or his words. Mostly it is to females, most times, from male to female. The people that suffer it most is female. That's what I mean. Today, I don't know if we have any, apart from the courts, we have any institution to fight or to sensitize people on how to curb domestic violence. But I think the government should set up a committee in the government that will see to domestic violence. Most times, the mind, consciousness, they don't have that consciousness. If they educate them on how to cohabit with a spouse or a ward or a brother or a sister, it will be better. But I've not seen anybody, apart from maybe few NGOs, anybody set up by government to look into domestic violence. If there is something like that, I think the menace will be reduced. To me, I still repeat, from the family, from the government angle, in our religious organizations, it should be preached, and they should bring up a body that will look into it so that domestic violence can be reduced drastically.
From my perspective, the rise of domestic violence in our society, first and foremost, could be traced to breakdown in communication. We find of recent that in most households where domestic violence are recorded, it is either of one member of the family, if it is a husband-wife relationship, or where one perhaps thinks or begin to perceive himself as superior, or where one is looking for equality in a relationship. But where there is adequate communication, I think that they can easily put their ideas and opinions across to one another.
Well, I think domestic violence, answer the name it is called. It's really a violence, because for you to look at human life sometimes, especially when it comes to children, you probably maltreat them. Sometimes you discipline them by using unacceptable objects. We have seen cases like using pressing iron on children and the rest of them. Such acts, if it is possible, can even be equated as acts of terrorism. But then it is also important that we should look at the government arrangement on the ground in terms of issues like that. I'm talking about government regulation, government laws. If someone has a victim is like that, as such, is being maltreated like that. Sometimes we have parents that will say, "Is my child? Is it not my child? Is it not my child?" It's like such parents could probably get away with it. But when they realize that there are government regulations on ground, it will keep them on check that domestic violence is not. And besides, it's not only on children as well. Even adults can be maltreated when it comes to domestic violence. The husband can commit acts of domestic violence on the wife. And interestingly, which people may not believe, the wife might also commit acts of domestic violence on the husband as well. You know, these are matters that should really be addressed properly.
Domestic violence is a trending issue. Anyway, it's been there and it's a global thing. It's not limited within Nigerian jurisdiction alone. It's unfortunate that it happens both in high places and in lower places. By high places, I mean even the educated does that to their wives, to their children, and to the people living with them. Now it's done in the private and in the public. In the private, how do I mean? It could be applicable in the home. That's why it's called domestic. But even in offices, it's applicable. And domestic violence is not limited to the women alone. It's also affecting the men. Now, when it comes to domestic violence, as the word is domestic, it's majorly at home. You find a situation where a man beats up his so-called loving wife, a woman whom he has professed love to and has married with his own money. He beats her up. The woman has psychological trauma. She has emotional trauma and other forms of trauma. She's being depressed. Sometimes she will not be allowed to practice whatever she has studied. She could be an educated person, but the man will not allow her to even work with her certificate, even with her first class and with her master's and PhD holder certificate and all that. Sometimes it comes on the form of hitting her, beating her so hard that you find injuries. Sometimes they end up pouring her hot water, pouring her acid and all sorts of things that will be very harmful to her skin. And it's more painful when you find even a female doing that to house help living with her. And it could be a male or a female. Sometimes you see madams, as they put it, beating up their wards, their female ward, pouring them hot water, pouring them cold water, pouring them hot oil and different things. It's really, really bad. Another one, a situation where a woman beats even the boy at home because it's part of domestic violence. These things happen every day. And you see people dying because they don't talk. That's why we ask that, how can this thing be curbed? It can be curbed when the issue of silence is being out of the field, it's being flushed out, where people begin to talk about what has been happening to them. That look, I am being beaten, I am being asked to do this, I am being asked not to do that. If you speak up, the silence will be broken and you hear it that look, such a thing has happened and the law will come to your rescue. For instance, we have the people they call International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA. By the time you report this issue to them, they go as far as rescuing you. They have done several things when it comes to domestic violence. They travel to different local governments. They try to assist the women and children. Sometimes, unfortunately, that it's not only the women that are affected, the men too are affected. Sometimes you could see some women who are bigger than their husband, probably financially or otherwise. They tend to tell the men, don't do this, don't do that. They tend to monitor him. These are in some ways of violence. I mean, these things could be curbed. When the person speaks out, it could be curbed. When somebody even wants to assist, they say, no, don't assist, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. That's part of the silence. Because when you keep silence, you won't be saved. But when you speak out, you'll be saved. To a very large extent, that's the way, I mean, these things could be curbed in the society. For instance, in Rivers State, I must commend our judges, our magistrates, our honors. They have been doing excellently well. They've been doing a lot. They've been doing it. There are so much cases before them, so much. But any of this domestic violence, when it comes to them, they try as much as they can to ensure that such act doesn't come up again. They try to ensure that they punish the offenders. They try to make sure that the women are being rescued, the children are being rescued. There are so many cases which the court has assisted in one way or the other. They have been trying. I must commend them.
You've heard from the public what they think about domestic violence and how it affects our society. But the crux of the matter still remains that domestic violence is a no-no for any sane society to thrive. You can join the conversation on our social media handle pages showing on the screen. I remain David Everest. See you next time.